This is the latest Motorola smartphone to support Moto Mods hardware add-ons, the Moto Z2 Play. The original Moto Z Play emerged last year as a more affordable alternative to flagship-class Moto Z phones while still supporting Moto Mods add-ons. That phone hit a lot of high points, including delivering some phenomenal battery life. Can we expect more of the same from its follow-up? I'm Steven Shank with PhoneArena. In addition to answering that question, I'll also be introducing you to the latest assortment of Moto Mods as I review the Moto Z2 Play.
LG tried making a modular phone and gave up after one attempt. Google was all ready to launch a pilot project, but then that effort went up in smoke. Yet not only did Motorola introduce a whole modular phone ecosystem last year, it's back this year with new hardware. The Moto Z2 Play sure looks a lot like other Moto Z phones, but that's to be expected. If you want to come to the Moto Mods party, that means locking your hardware design into a specific size and shape. But even with those limitations, the Moto Z2 Play manages to stand out a little bit, showing off a few key departures from last year's first-gen model. The most obvious change there is in terms of thickness, with the Moto Z2 Play slimming down a millimeter to come in just under 6mm. That's not quite as thin as the super slim original Moto Z, but it is a notable step for a mid-range device starting to embrace design over more utilitarian concerns. While that both makes the Moto Z2 Play an attractive phone, as well as gives it more space to grow as you attach Moto Mods of varying thickness, it does come at a price, and there's not room for nearly as large a battery as we got on the first Moto Z Play. We'll check that out in just a minute, but first let's finish our overview of the Z2 Play's hardware. We've got the familiar Moto Z camera bump on the phone's back, and below it the expected Moto Mods connector. Around front, the phone features a 5.5-inch screen, and below it a speedy, responsive fingerprint scanner. Up top is the earpiece, which also doubles as the phone's primary speaker, as well as a front-facing camera with all too rare dual LED flash. On the right edge lives the volume up, down, and power buttons, while the hybrid microSD SIM tray sits up top. And on the bottom edge we find the full-speed USB 3.1 Type-C port, as well as an analog headphone jack, just like on the first-gen Moto Z Play, but which other Moto Z models ditched. Without any Moto Mods attached, the Moto Z2 Play looks and feels great, and its lightweight and thin build make the phone feel a lot more premium than its just north of $400 price tag would otherwise suggest. The phone's 5.5-inch screen is an AMOLED component with a 1080 by 1920 resolution, and while it delivers bold colors, they're not super accurate. More concerning, though, is low overall brightness, and in outside usage we found ourselves right up against the edge of readability in direct sunlight. Last year, the first Moto Z Play ran a Snapdragon 625 chip, a mid-range processor renowned for its power efficiency. The Z2 Play upgrades that to a Snapdragon 626, but the gains here are small. This new chip uses the same basic tech as the old one, but runs at a 10% higher max clock speed. That spells a minimal performance boost, and makes it difficult to recommend upgrading if you already have the original. The version of the phone we checked out, as available for Verizon, has 3GB of RAM and 32GB storage, both sufficient figures for a phone in this class. There should also be a 64GB edition, but it looks like we'll be waiting for the start of unlocked sales for that one. Even without a lot of top-tier silicon, the Moto Z2 Play performs well enough for a mid-ranger. We also get the benefit of Motorola's lightweight Android interface, keeping close to stock while also delivering some useful enhancements. Our favorites there include the phone's gesture controls, offering shortcuts to action with a few shakes or rotations of the handset, as well as hands-free Moto Display activation. There's also handy fingerprint scanner-based navigation control, swiping back and forth to get around apps. The 12-megapixel main camera offers an f1.7 aperture, dual-pixel autofocus, as well as laser assistance. For the most part, it works rather well, producing acceptable shots with a minimal amount of effort, and of course there's a pro mode if you do feel like tinkering. Video recording is also mostly successful, though we did run into a few of the same hiccups we saw when testing the Moto G5 Plus, which uses a camera that sure feels a lot like this one. Maybe that's the biggest problem here, as that phone costs only $230. For a handset that's going north of $400, shouldn't the camera here be in a different class? The front facer, at least, is a nice touch, mostly due to the presence of its dual LED flash, really helping out with low light shots. Battery life is good, but in dropping capacity from 3,510 mAh last year to 3,000 mAh for the Z2 Play, it understandably takes a hit, here coming in with around 9.5 hours of screen on time. Recharge times also aren't bad, but at over 2 hours are a bit slower than we see from a lot of new phones these days. Instead of a bottom edge mounted speaker, or even one on the phone's back, Motorola gives the Z2 Play a front firing speaker in the form of the handset's earpiece. The positioning is nice, but the sound quality leaves something to be desired, with not much in the way of satisfying bass tones. Luckily for us, this is a Moto Z phone, so better speakers are just a Moto Mod away. We tried out the new JBL Sound Boost 2, an upgrade over last year's model that comes with an attractive new look and the arrival of water resistance. The speaker houses its own battery for delivering up to 10 hours of playback, and the output really does sound nice and loud. Really though, we love it most for the kickstand, which makes watching media on the attached phone a dream. We also checked out the Moto Turbo Power Pack, which more than doubles battery life with its nearly 3500 mAh capacity. This one offers some useful configuration options, like choosing whether you wanted to keep your phone topped up or go the slightly more efficient route and keep the phone's battery hovering around 80%. It's a useful add-on, but like the speakers, is also a bit thick. On the much slimmer side, we have a new Moto style shell, now incorporating support for wireless charging. The fabric weave texture looks awesome and doesn't add much heft to the phone. With the right hardware, it even supports fast charging. Sales of the speakers, power pack, and wireless charging back will go for about $80, $80, and $40 respectively.
The Moto Z2 Play is a decent smartphone, but also a bit of a frustrating one. Now, we love seeing the Moto Mods project continue, and priced at just over $400, this does represent an affordable point of entry. But we also can't ignore things like that subpar screen, performance that isn't quite enough of an improvement over last year, and a camera that feels like it belongs on a lower priced phone. Maybe that pricing issue is key here. You're paying a premium for Moto Mod support, and you're paying a premium for a really thin phone, but you can get hardware a lot like this for much, much less. If you're just now getting into modular smartphone hardware, the Moto Z2 Play could be a good first phone. If you already have last year's device though, we wouldn't recommend upgrading. And really, it might be worth your while waiting just a little bit longer to see what other Moto Z phones could be just over the horizon. I'm Stephen Shank with PhoneArena. Thanks for watching, and be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming reviews.